Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Associate Director of Public Programs and Events here at the IDA. Before we begin, I would like to start, as always, with a brief land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you today from Chicago, which is on the unceded land of the Potawatomi people, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I would also like to thank our media sponsor, IndieWire, for bringing this series to all of you today. You can check out our upcoming screenings. We have just about a month left at documentary.org/screening-series. And without any further ado, I'm gonna get this conversation started around HBO's LFG and hand things over to Christy Lemire.
Okay. Hey guys, so good to see you. I am Christy Lemire from RogerEbert.com and the Breakfast All Day podcast. And I'm thrilled to be talking today with the documentarian duo, the co-directors, producers of the fantastic LFG. That is Andrea Nix Fine and Sean Fine. Good to see you guys. How are you?
Good.
Very
Thanks
good.
for having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
So good to see you. You guys are in DC. I am in rainy Palos Verdes Estates, hometown of Kristen Press. So it's appropriate to be talking to you today. So the case at the center of LFG is not over yet. The film is done. You guys finished it. It's out there for the world to enjoy and get angry about and learn from. But the case is still going on. So can you just catch us up real fast with what the status of the lawsuit is?
Well, after summary judgment, the next kind of legal steps was that the players powwowed with their legal team more formally, and they decided for sure, yes, they're going to pursue an appeal. And that's what they did. They basically said, there's no way we're giving up on this. We want to hopefully either settle to something we agree with or see them in court. That's what they would choose to do. Since then, there's been a couple moments of interest where both sides are able to file something called Amicus Briefs, which is defined as friends of the court for either side. And it's basically sort of persuasive arguments of people who are affected, but are not part of the lawsuit per se. So they did that. And interestingly, when some of the groups that did file on behalf of the women's soccer team as friends of their side was the men's soccer team themselves, and the EEOC. So I think that it's been very interesting to see, what sort of who's come up and saying what. I thought that was one of the most interesting developments. So it could appeal at any time, as I was saying before, settle at any time. I think US soccer is sort of feeling the weight of the public really weighing in and being even more shocked about, their continued holdout. And anything else?
No.
Yeah.
And are you guys staying in contact with the players as this makes its way through the appeals process?
Yeah, we stay in contact with the players and also the legal team, and also just the whole team working on it. So we're pretty much in contact with everyone. Yeah.
Are there plans? Like, are you gathering, interviews with them as you would be ordinarily as documentarians for a follow-up of any sort?
It's funny, we haven't. The film was a really big lift, so I think we haven't done that. But I think like everybody keeps asking us, so it is kind of starting to gnaw at us and itch at us, like, what's the follow-up to this? Because it could take up to 2 years for the appeal. I mean, we hope. It's kind of like Megan said at the film, like if we win, everyone wins, and we hope that means settling and they can move on to the next chapter of like celebrating, this great sport they play and empowering others to be great as well.
Yeah, and hopefully that will, trickle over into every other kind of walk of life where women are not getting paid the equal to men who do the same job. A lot of your work in the past has been about activism, journalism, activism, filmmaking. Why this particular story now?
Well, it's interesting. I think I'll answer the second one first. I think why this particular story now was I think like anything, it just popped through the headlines. I mean, on March 8th, International Women's Day, the most celebrated women's team in the world, right before they go to the World Cup, decides to sue their only employer to play the game at this level. That takes a lot of chutzpah and bravery. So that immediately is like, hey, what's that all about? And then secondly, how, if this team is feeling undervalued, despite all their victories, what's behind that? What's, and so you start looking into it. And while we knew the women were fascinating characters, just because we were fans anyway, I think it really, what pushed it was that this fight just goes beyond this particular sport or even this team and this, boss. It really goes to this bigger issue of women's equality everywhere. The idea of how are women being valued? And that ripple effect, that's a conversation, especially after the pandemic, which is continuing to have greater legs and bigger impact. And it's just getting a lot more momentum. So it kind of felt like a story of the moment. And that way, I think we wanted to make sure we could tell it the way we like telling it, which is very much through personal experience. But in terms of the activism question, I think it's an interesting one. It's one that we've talked about at length.
I think we consider, we always consider ourselves filmmakers first and then activists second. So this is it's a great story. And I think the other part is it's not just a great story because it's in the news and because Megan Rapinoe's in it and a lot of famous people are in it in terms of like the US women's soccer team and they have notoriety, but it's a great story because it's a classic to us. Like it's a David and Goliath story. It's like, these women shouldn't be fighting Goliath for this. They should be the Goliath. And so that was an interesting story to us. And then also the human side. You don't hear about the human side of athletes that often, especially women athletes, because, I think oftentimes they're portrayed as so strong and they have to be strong all the time. So they don't let their guard down that often to let you really see who they are, or maybe, some of their weaknesses or emotional points in a fight like this. And so we felt like in the beginning, if we could do that, if we could get some of that and feel what it feels like, what they're going through, as well as the facts, and marry those together, that would make a really great story.
And the only other point I'd like to make is that when we started out in this film, it was from a very open standpoint of how are we going to tell this story? We quite honestly were hoping that we'd have a lot more access to the players through US Soccer, right? That when we first approached them about just wanting to do something on the team and wanting to film with Megan, they, without even trying to find out more about it, were very clear that if it touched on equal pay, they'd shut it down. Because they ultimately hold access of the footage you shoot. They have to record, they only approve it finally after they see how it's used in the entire film. So you can go all the way through your whole process just to have them say, no, you cannot use any of this footage. And so that meant, well, that's not what's going to happen, right? We can't tell this story without knowing to the very end. And we also meant that we couldn't film them easily in their training and in their playing games and everything. So that presented a huge hurdle, but they sort of set the tone and it pivoted. So in a while, I do want active impact to come of this. Activism as part of where we start with each story is not necessarily like, oh, we're just going to tell one person's side and not. We had hoped US Soccer would have come through, and we did ask them to participate again at the end.
And so out of sheer necessity, you had to figure it all out all over again.
Yeah.
They made it hard for you, but you're like, no, we're still going to tell the story.
Ultimately, it's not fair that they are the gatekeepers to telling this women's story and what their fight is for equality. It's not their right to decide whether that story gets out or not. And in that way, that does feel like a piece of activism that we definitely will get behind, is like who has the right to deny a story to be made. And I don't think that's just for them to step in front of that. And so that was always a challenge the whole way. They're obviously not very happy about this, and you can see it in the press that they're not. But we stand behind, we work very hard to be incredibly accurate and use court documents and their own filings. And it took 2 years to get to the bottom of all the facts and figures you see in the film. So in that sense, we're very, we come from a position of strength of how we feel about every assertion in the film.
Totally. And so when you decided you wanted to make this movie, then you had to approach each person individually, clearly, because US Soccer wasn't going to help you. What was that process like of approaching all these women, and what were the conversations like as far as who was willing to do it and who was not?
I mean, it was not easy because first of all, we tried to approach them before they went to the World Cup, but they basically filed the lawsuit. And then really soon after, they heard our request and they were kind of contemplating it, but they were basically, what we got back from them is, we're shutting down. We have to win the World Cup. We're tuning everything out. We're focusing on our team and playing, and we have to win. So all this stuff will have to wait. So the first meeting we had really was with Megan Rapinoe right after they got back from France and they got off the plane in New York. It was like the next morning. They had just literally got off the plane. And so
That's crazy.
yeah. So our co-producer and partner, Abby Greensfelder, and us, so we had coffee with Megan, and basically we told her the way we work. We told her the way we wanted to tell the story through the team's voice and not experts and things like that. And she's like, I'm in, and that's, I think, the beautiful thing about Megan. And also at that time, she was really famous at that time, but probably not as famous as she is now. So I think we got her right at the right time, but also kind of the amazing thing about her, I think, is that when she says she's going to do something, she does it, and she decides she's going to do it, she's going to do it. And so that helped us, but she was also like, and I'm not helping you get any other players. Like, you're going to have to go get the other ones on your own, which was,
it's for them to decide.
it's for them to decide. So yeah,
that dynamic is very much how they work. They basically understand their collective power is as a team, but they don't ever feel like they can ever answer for one another, which is like an amazing concept. It makes it really hard for us just in terms of access, because part of what you want to do is, who do you choose because of access and who do you choose because of story? Now Megan's a no-brainer because she'd obviously already been like a voice box for them to put their story out, and she was sort of that face during the World Cup and any of the press that they got on it. But then afterwards, she's been an activist since she could walk, really. It sounds like. But we needed to do the chemistry of the team. And then when you're trying to figure out how many characters, what's making sure, since there's no narrator, you're choosing experiences that really give you a sense of the whole, even if you're, you can't follow 28 people, nor would we want to. So it's very, we wanted to make sure to have every player that maybe whose experience is probably uncelebrated, unknown, and kind of represents all the players. And then we needed people that have worked actively on the lawsuit for years, so they could articulate through their own past history and the work that they've done, what is for them the nuts and bolts of this lawsuit and how they made the decisions about it.
And then once you secured the group of players who were excited and willing to come and work with you guys on this, they're scattered across the country. They all play for different teams. Yeah. So how did you work that? Because you are in so many places at once when they are reacting to things. How did you manage that from a logistical perspective?
I mean, some of it we just filmed, with a lot of them in different places. But then the other part is, just because of COVID, happening, we quickly pivoted to this kind of, I'm a cinematographer on all of our films. And so we quickly kind of pivoted and started talking about how are we going to film this. For cinematographer of especially documentary cinematographer, to send people cameras is probably my worst nightmare. So
you just press a button. It's gonna be great.
Totally, yeah. And then to send people that are as busy as this team, and then also not only to shoot themselves, and then also to teach them how to upload it, and not just to do it with an iPhone, but actually send them real cameras that they can use, that give kind of a different feel. We worked really hard to do that, and I think it was really successful. And I kind of learned, at least from a cinematographer standpoint, to let go of that control that we have when we shoot something. I mean, there are times where I wish I was there. There are times where, as a cinematographer, you get to see things, or you see things very close up or different. I think than other people, than with your normal eyes. But I think that it was a blessing in a way to send everyone their cameras. And then also, I think the way we work, it transcended just being there with a camera, because usually we talk about being there and getting to know people, and they trust us and they know we'll put the camera down, so they open up to us even when we're next to them. But in this sense, they trusted us so much that they pulled the camera out and just filmed themselves in situations that they might not have let the camera come into, in their kitchen, in their living room, like at the lowest point of the lawsuit when they thought they were losing, you know, really intense times, they turn that camera on. I think before they even talk to people, like their reaction is it's so quick, it's so fresh. It's like it's really raw and true. And I think in a way it was a blessing, like to have to do that. And it was kind of one of those forced creative decisions that ended up like giving us some Easter eggs that I think we were very excited about.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that very question. I know that COVID happens right when you're in the middle of production. And of course, it affects the way you do post-production and all that. But interesting that became sort of almost like a confessional, right? Almost like there's catharsis to it. There's like an immediate kind of venting to it, again, out of sheer creative necessity. That's really interesting that was their instinct, you know, maybe because they felt so impassioned about this, that they wanted to get that out.
Yeah, I mean, truth be like, but we did definitely said, look, if anything happens with the case, will you please,
Yeah, we had to
record that. I mean, it wasn't though we didn't have to sort of say like, look, I think what I was moved by was this wasn't just any development in the case. It was a very incredibly painful development of the case, right? It was something where they're most vulnerable, and these ladies don't like to be vulnerable, right? Professional women, athletes, that's not in the repertoire, right? You want to be strong, you want to be together, you want to be courageous, you don't want to look weak or not really sure what next step is, any of that, right? So I think for them to do that, I was so grateful. And it also worked with the thing, level of communication and trust we set in the beginning, which was, look, this is not, if there is something that is legally sensitive that could ever harm your case, that is shared, but it's seen as being difficult or harmful to the ongoing back and forth and negotiation, we will make sure to like allow you to have a dialogue with us and like ultimately that's not what this film was about. And so, you know, for that reason, you'll see that it's their faces, right? We did not put the audio in with the call, and that had to be worked with the legal because some of that information couldn't disclose. But what you're looking at was the most important part, is that despite you're hearing the jargon that's not coming through, you're watching their faces fall and then like realize in real time and be upset and feel just like devastated. And that was very moving, I think, for us to have them give us their trust to do that. And I think it took a long time to get there, but I was very proud of the final effort that what it delivered.
One of the moments that sometimes we don't talk about a lot is, and I have to say, like Jessica Mcdonald is one of the first people to kind of embrace the camera. So for me, I think like, yeah, it's risky for Megan and Becky, and these players have been on the team a long time, but you know, for Jessica Mcdonald, you know, she just made the team. She's trying to make the team again to go to the Olympics at that time. She decides like, hey, you know, I am going to film myself. This is important. I'm going to bring this camera into the locker room. And I have to say that moment, there's a moment in the She Believes Cup where she brings, and it's only 2 shots. It's like, but cameras do not go in the locker room. And for her to do that, and you see how upset they are, and you hear them say, you know, let's fucking go before they leave the locker room. There's something about that moment that is, I think, pretty special. And there's something about her doing that shows how important this fight is, and how important it is for her and her son, and why she did it. When we ask her, you know, she's like, I have to do this. It's that important. So I think that was a very special moment. You wouldn't know that unless you kind of watched the film and we talked about it. It's not like an in your face moment. I think that meant a lot to us.
Well, it feels kind of sacred, right? You're in their sacred, hallowed private space there. And I was going to say that a lot of the moments that stuck with me the most are the intimate ones, like her saying goodbye to her little boy before she has to take off for training. I have a son who's 12 years old, and so I related to her immediately because of that. And the FaceTime call between Kristen Press and Megan Rapinoe, where they're like saying, you know, look out for yourself, you know, don't slow down a little bit. How did you achieve that kind of intimacy with these women, that kind of trust when, as you say, Andrea, they want to project strength at all times? What kind of conversations did you have with them that they finally felt comfortable to allow themselves to be vulnerable like that?
I think, you know, no matter what you can tell somebody who on one level is quite media savvy, all these women are very media savvy. that's their bread and butter for how they make their money outside of the salaries that they play in terms of sponsorships. Like they know how to do that, right? They didn't understand exactly what this would be. Even if you explain it, the idea of what you need and how much you need to be around and what you need to be open to, you try to explain it, but at the same time, there's, I think, a gut level of trust of, hey, do I like this person? Do I feel like they're telling me the truth? Do I feel like they're going to do what they say? If they told me they won't, you know, put the, like, will they put the camera down when I ask? Am I actually a collaborative partner in this, in that way? And that's what we try to explain and in the beginning. And then I think it's just spent time with them, right? That they start to trust you. I honestly think that's a lot of what doc filmmaking is about when you're coming into that, is it's just sort of, hi, I'm a human, you're a human, please trust me with this. And because we actually believe it, like we feel like it's a huge honor to tell people's stories. We put an enormous amount of effort into making sure that we capture who they are, of what they're letting us into, that it's authentic to who they are. And I think that that's kind of where it lives and breathes. And so people let you in a little bit more.
And this one has a lot more layers. I think when you film athletes and famous athletes, when you get agents involved and, you know, publicists and all these people, especially nowadays, they're like the first wave you have to get through. And even when you get through them, until you get to that person and you're actually filming with that person, as a documentarian, I don't think they understand what we do. I think they think they do. I think they like see, you know, oh, it's like a 30 for 30, or it's like, you know, oh, I saw Nike did some content on this player and that's what it is. And it isn't that. And so it's like explaining to them slowly, it's kind of warts and all. And you have to, and actually when we screened at Tribeca at the premiere, Megan said, like, it was kind of this nice compliment to us. She was like, now I understand why you were like so close to me all the time and filming me. So I didn't know, like sometimes I was like, I didn't want this camera so close to me. And she was like, because I could see how exhausted I was. I could see, like, just looking at myself, she was like, I could see this kind of constant just grind of this lawsuit and what it was doing to me. And, you know, and we were glad she picked up on it, because it's those details that are important to us in storytelling.
And ultimately, we tried to convey something that we feel like the film is also coming through on. This isn't a sports doc, right? I think a lot of people haven't seen this yet. They say, oh, soccer, do I relate to that or not? Do I care about this sport? And I think what I will always say to people is give this a shot is going beyond sport. It's much more than that. Yes, it's about women's equal pay, but it's also about a piece of history that we're trying to share, and it kind of has it's got like tentacles that go way back. That's kind of telling of women's experience overall. And so that's why we felt it was important, even though it's a very personal story, to kind of make sure that you're sort of hearkening back to other women mentors, other leadership, other people that change the conversation like these women are, but it goes beyond that.
I love that you captured that little bit of sound from the Good Morning America anchor saying like, thank you, because we're not all getting paid the same as our male counterparts. So that was a very cool little tidbit there.
Yeah, that was. And then, you know, we made sure that, you know, that because it was an off-camera moment. So we wanted to make sure she was okay with having that out there. You know, the last thing we want to do is like encroach.
Of course. Yeah.
She was like, you know, and to her credit, she was all in. So that was a very important moment.
So Andrea, you mentioned it's not purely a sports doc, but you have a soccer past yourself. And I know you said that has been hugely influential on you as far as the way you conduct yourself in the world. Can you discuss that a little bit, please?
I always played soccer. It was the only sport I played, and I just kind of loved it. And I think I don't know, I think it teaches you how to inhabit your body as a position of strength. And that is how you hold yourself. It's how you make an impact on people understanding who you are and coming back. And you know, I think it's also a trust that you can kind of get knocked around a little bit within a sports realm, at least, and you can kind of pick back up again. I also think it's great to work with women achieving something. You know, when I haven't seen these women for decades, when I bump into them again, it's just the way we start talking to each other and like joking around. It just has you just live in a different world. You know, I think people are complex, women are complex. You have all these different lives. And I think I just felt like I wanted to come through and make sure they saw themselves on the screen. I wanted to make sure that these women felt that they were not just heard about, here's what happened, but they came across as athletes and as intellects and as a power collective, and also as like individuals, you know, that it's not all nice and fine and neat. There's a lot of like dissension to finally get to where they're going to be to make a decision, you know, but they're just an undeniable force. And I felt like I wanted to make sure I could be true to what I felt like the power of that sport is, and women athletes in general, and the leaders that they become. And then I also wanted to make sure that they felt like they saw themselves, and by knowing the sport, playing the sport, like reveling in it, that it also like affected our music choices, our graphic choices. It's not apologizing, it's not requesting, it's about, hey, here I am, you know, see me, value me, pay me.
I should mention the title. I love the fact that you guys open with them all kind of playing with the title a little bit. Ever any qualms along the way, or any concern about, oh, there's an F in it, and how are critics or how are media folks writing about the film going to get around that? Or was it just like, let's fucking do it?
I mean, it was all Andrea. So it's like, I'll be honest, like I was at first, like, I liked it, but I was like, oh, you know, I'm saying I don't know if HBO will like this, or I don't know, you know, how's it, or little girls supposed to watch this that are on soccer teams? Like, we're talking about it, and Andrew was like, no, this is it. This is like how we're going to do this. And like, so and then there was like different iterations of it where it's just, you don't have the full word fucking spelled out. You have like asterisks and things. And like, she was like, no, like, and so like but like, I think it made complete sense. And it's like, it is true to what it is. And you meet them also telling you what it means to them, each player. So there's like an individuality, but a collective, that achieving that thing Andrea talks about. And you see that they're human too. Like, it kind of takes the veneer off a little bit, even though that's the thing they use. And yeah, I mean, we both, like, when we heard that they said that in the locker room, we were like, that's got to be it.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It was after we had just started filming them. We had just come from after filming the parade, and we're in DC, and we were talking about it. And I just was like, this is just, they keep saying it to each other. It's what they do. It's who they are. It's how they see what they're all about. And they're like yelling it to each other right before they step on the field. I mean, it was clear as day. And I knew there was concern that people were going to be upset or offended, because the last thing you want to do is make people not watch the film before it even starts, you know, but it's just so good. It's just what I was like, no. We fought a long time to make sure that came through. And I think it was just, if you just keep on saying it like the title, then everybody starts to think it is.
I mean, we talked about it on the radio, and I found a way to get around it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. You can guess what the F stands for.
Yeah. It's also like, it's used by other, you know, it's used by Tom Brady, it's used by NFL players, but for some reason, it is interesting. For some reason, when we tried to use it for this, it's like, it brought up a lot of questions from a lot of people, and we had to dig our heels in pretty good with it, but it stuck pretty hard. Once people were like, okay, fine, it stuck. And now everybody's like, I would never have called it anything else, or never done anything else with the open. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And the whole opening sequence, Sean, is the first glimpse we see of your beautiful work as cinematographer. The interviews are so gorgeous, and like, just their eyes are all so hypnotically magnetic. What was your approach in the way that you lighted them when you guys had all those interviews in the film?
We just wanted it. I mean, we always believe the face is the most important thing, and the expression someone's face makes when they're talking, and they're talking directly to you, that if you can't turn away, because you're watching everything they're saying, you're watching their expression in their eyes, you're watching. And I think that was the main thing we wanted to do. And then we wanted to kind of equalize. We talked about how to equalize the background so that they're all in a similar shade of background, but that their face is the most present. And so, you know, we're able to shoot, I mean, a shot with the Sony Venice, and it's a full frame camera, which means I can get closer and still have that nice fall off in the back and see all the detail in the face. And we only I'm actually lit with a light that I love, but it's like it's probably made in the 80s, like, and people don't use it too much anymore. And it's a tungsten light, but I think the light it gives off is a really classic kind of beautiful light, and we light from above. And it's just, it also feels like, if you see the set where we shoot, it feels confessional. It feels really like, even though we're in a studio and we've lit it and everything, you almost feel like you're in a box, like in a confessional box, the way the light is right in front of you and the lens. And I think, yeah, I think we've always, ever since War Dance 2, we've always fell in love with that, looking straight into the lens.
I know we talk about changing it, and then as soon as we start to like look around again, and it's the difference if I'm talking to you, like, you know, if I'm answering you like this, right? And I'm talking about something, and then all of a sudden there's something that it just hits, and it just, we weren't the first people for sure to ever do that, but we just can't.
It's funny because people are always like
wanting that kind of connection.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's like Errol Morris did that with it, but it's different because, well, like Errol Morris is another room, like yelling, right, at the people generally, and like we're like right there, so it's a little different. But this style for us came from it's funny, like we came from watching Inside Man a long time ago, the Spike Lee. And the first scene is Clive Owen, and we were both sitting in the theater, and just Clive Owen's face right on the screen, and he's like, I'm going to tell you a story, and we're just like, wow, like we can't turn away, like I want to see what's next. And so that made us apply that to War Dance, apply it to like every film we've done. We keep applying that same kind of feel, and so far it feels like you connect. And I think for this film, we talked about that we generally don't like to leave the interview up on the screen a lot, you know, because it's like a talking head, and we don't want people to get bored. But we felt like in this film, it was important to see what they had to say when they saw it, so not cut away to some scene or something, you know. So I think compared to some of our other films, you might see them speaking more. But we also talked about like they don't really get a chance to speak that often. People speak for them. And so it's very important for us to like have them connect with you, and have their day about this issue.
Yeah, it's disarming. It's like instantly captivating, but it sort of catches you off guard, like, oh, this looks different.
Well, it's interesting. We now have enough films that we've made that like when you start thinking about what sort of connects them, it's interesting that you're not even aware of. But like we will always say we're going to start one way or the other, or we play around no matter what. We cut the open of every film like we've ever done like 20 times. Like it's always the big deal. How are you going to start? But ultimately you feel like, hi, I want to meet this person. I want to meet them like I'm going to be met. It's the same way of talking about how we try to introduce ourselves to them. You want to have a moment where you're looking at somebody and you're studying them. We did it with Innocente. We did it with the War Dance. We did it with Life According to Sam. You just want to hear them a little bit. You just want to, I don't know, it's how we all assess people. You notice like the way their clothes are sitting, or the way they like maybe twitch their head, or just the way they look around. And then when they lock in, and you really want this channel that you're setting up between the two people. And that's always what we like to be able to do. Yeah, because they're going to be the ride you're on. You're going to be inside that life, looking out through those eyes.
And also everything they say, then what they say kind of throws you a little bit. Like, I think it's important that, you know, you think you're going to get the classic Megan Rapinoe or these classic answers that you might think in your mind, but when they just come on and talk LFG, it's a little bit like, wow, what am I watching here? And I think we try to do that with every film too. So you're meeting them, but they just throw you a tiny curveball that makes you want to hopefully watch more.
No, it definitely works. Well, we have to wrap in a sec, but I wanted to ask you one last thing. What do you hope folks take away from watching this film?
Well, I think on the first blush, it's like better understanding what this team's fight is all about. Right? Like, I think there's been a lot of, they're in the news a lot, and this fight gets a lot, but I think we wanted to make sure to unpack, like, when you walk away, you should be understanding why these women are fighting, why all women kind of fight to be valued, to see it, and then sort of take away, like, how does that, these are the glasses that you're now looking through, and as you go forward in the world, right? Whether you're discussing something with something in a workforce, or just like inner dynamics between people. We want people to really like use this as a guide to sort of, how am I valuing the person sitting across from me?
And ultimately an inspirational thing too. I mean, I think that you can, you know, there's probably a bad guy in everybody's life, you know, and I think that it's like when people can come together and agree, even though like it's amazing, all the women on the soccer team are very different. They come from all over the United States, different religions, different sexual orientation, everything. Yet they all come together for this one purpose. And when they do, I think they're going to get what they want. They're unstoppable and they don't give up. I mean, this has been going on for, decades, and they're still fighting and they're still going strong. And I think that if they can do it, I hope it inspires other people that they can do that, and to find a commonality, to come together, to speak up when things are wrong.
I didn't get a chance to ask you about Julie Faudi, whose perspective is invaluable, just to speak to how long this has unfortunately been going on. She was a hoot, by the way. She was an awesome guest.
I was so
amazing.
impressed. She's a commentator for ESPN. A lot of people know her. And she, of course, was a former player, but I just was so captivated by her when she sat down. I just found her incredibly funny and moving, insightful, honest. And you get why she was the captain of her team in her day. She still feels like the captain of anyone's team that would have, it would be lucky to have her. I just think I was so grateful that she said yes, because she gives a perspective and she creates a story arc over decades of time that you're like, oh, I get it. This has been pissing them off for a really long time, and they've tried every avenue, and they're like, okay, we're done. Now we're going to, go forward. So yeah, I loved her too. And the whole GFY thing, I just was like, oh my God, I couldn't write that. I just want to get ahead. So it's like, LFG in the front and GFY in the back.
That's the sequel, right? That's the sequel to LFG. It's writing itself for you.
Right. We need to do the prequel, right?
That is great. Well, you guys are wonderful. I'm so thankful to you both for talking to me. I hope that this opens people's eyes to what is going on in this line of work and in so many, and hopefully they will win their fight. The long overdue equal pay. But thanks to both of you, and thanks to IDA for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.